Hey folks, I'm Chris and I'm your Commander Mechanic, and we're here with a special live build. You can catch me on Twitch every Monday night live streaming at twitch.tv/CommanderMechanic. And today's deck build is one that's been requested in a way by a lot of viewers. I get asked the question pretty often, how do you build a deck when you don't start with the commander? How do you build a deck when you start with a card in the 99 and essentially use it as a hidden commander and brew around that card? How do you find ways to pull it out of the deck? How do you find ways to cast it over and over again? How do you find ways to just make the most of a card that you don't have guaranteed access to, like a commander? And I wanted to do this with something that's a little atypical. You've seen my companion builds here on the channel. That's like building with a card that's not in the 99, but you still have access to it at all times. Thank you very much, Mike, for your sub. Really appreciate it, buddy. I wanted to brew with something within the 99, much like my Academy Manufactor builds, which you've seen here on the channel. I'll link it up top here in the YouTube for everybody. But I wanted to start with Fractured Identity. I released a short today, Monday, about this card, and I wanted to get into it a little bit further. Fractured Identity is an Azorius-colored, so white and blue, sorcery. Okay, so our hidden commander in the deck is going to be a sorcery. It says exile target non-land permanent. Each player other than that controller, than its controller, creates a token that's a copy of it. Okay, so you can exile something from somebody else and give it to everybody else. You can exile something of yours and give it to everybody else. So really interesting here, and my mind immediately goes to these weird brews and these strange opportunities for us to really cause some issues at the table or to really help the table out. So this is a deck that we can brew as group hug or group slug or something that gives everybody else permanence. So let's find out how this works. Just as a heads up, in Moxfield, in order to add cards to a deck, they need to be of your commander's color identity. So I've just thrown in the Sliver Queen here, a Wooburg 5-color commander, so that we can add whatever cards we want in here. Once we see what the deck looks like, we'll cut down to what our color identity for the deck is going to be, then choose what our commander is going to be. All right, so we're going to work from the inside out as opposed to starting with a commander and working inwards. All right. Okay, so one of the first things that a lot of people go for with Fractured Identity are cards with drawbacks and downsides. When I posted my short today, I had people all over the place asking me to include Phage the Untouchable in this deck. And I'll pull up Phage in a second here so that we can see what she does. So Phage the Untouchable. So Phage the Untouchable is a black legend that costs 7 mana. Okay, 3 colorless and 4 black. She says when Phage enters the battlefield, if you didn't cast her from your hand, you lose the game. And then whenever Phage deals combat damage to a creature, destroy that creature. So Death Touch. And then whenever Phage deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game. All right, Onin Fools, good to see you, buddy. All right, so a lot of people have said put Phage in the deck so that you can hard cast her, then give her to everybody else, and everybody else loses the game when you give Phage a copy because they make a copy that enters the battlefield that wasn't cast. All right, really interesting. I think that 7 mana cost, especially with 4 black mana, might be a little difficult to pull off, but it's something that we can do. All right. The other one that was recommended a lot is a big favorite of mine, which is Leveler. All right. Leveler is a 5 mana 10/10 artifact creature that says when Leveler enters the battlefield, exile all cards from your library. All right. This means that, we would have to have Leveler in play, meaning that we would be exiling all of the cards from our library. that's a little iffy, but if we can do something like Cast Leveler and immediately Fractured Identity Leveler, then it doesn't matter. If we've got no cards from our library, we aren't drawing any cards, Levelers enter play on our turn, exiling everybody else's libraries, then they untap and go to their draw step and draw from an empty library and lose the game. It requires 10 mana, but it doesn't require a heavy color investment, which is interesting. There are a lot of ways that we can get around Levelers enter the battlefield effect as well, which we might want to investigate. All right. There are a bunch of other cards that we can include in this, from creatures like this to enchantments that we don't want as well. I'm reminded of a couple of Zedru the Great-Hearted decks, and we'll take a look at Zedru here. So Zedru the Great-Hearted is a Jeskai, red, white, and blue colored commander that wants to give away your permanents. Okay, a 2/4 for 4. At the beginning of your upkeep, you gain X life and draw X cards, where X is the number of permanents you own that your opponents control. Then you can pay 3 mana, red, white, and blue, to give somebody control of a permanent. Decks built around Zedru like giving away permanents that you don't want to keep. So this might be somewhere that we look further down the road to add in other cards and colors. All right? But we'll leave it in the deck just for inspiration's sake right now. Now, EDH Beats there in chat, you recommended a couple of cards here. Acheron Legionnaire. So Acheron Legionnaire, let's take a look at this. An 8 mana card from Legends. Except for Acheron Legionnaire, non-artifact creatures you control cannot attack. All right, and that's an 8/4 for 8. Yikes. That's not exactly good, but not exactly bad either. Giving everybody an 8/4 that can attack is okay, I suppose, but keep in mind that Fractured Identity is a sorcery, meaning we've got to cast it on our turn, meaning everybody gets to untap and attack with an 8/4 on their turn. Pretty easy to run 8/4s into 8/4s in this case, and just have people get rid of that gift that you've given them. Not a huge fan of it, but it's not exactly against what we want here. All right. You also mentioned Demonic Pact. All right. And Demonic Pact is an enchantment, a 4 mana black enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose one that hasn't been chosen. Demonic Pact deals 4 damage to target creature or player, and you gain 4 life. Target opponent discards 2 cards, you draw 2 cards, or you lose the game. That means 4 upkeep choices and you lose the game with Demonic Pact. But those upsides are pretty decent. Okay? Giving something to somebody that says you lose the game is right up our alley. That's kind of what we want to do here. But the fact that Demonic Pact goes through 4 turns of some pretty decent upsides before somebody losing the game is something that we might want to be considerate of here, because this is something that, you know, somebody can get 3 good choices out of it and then destroy it with artifact or enchantment removal, right? We want something that's got a little bit more of an immediate impact, and we'll take a look at a couple of those too. My first thought goes to anything that prevents us from doing things. I'm going to pop over here to Scryfall, and I am going to look up "you can't." So anything with the text on it, you can't, right? Because this is going to give to our opponents something that prevents them from doing something. Abyssal Persecutor, for instance, you can't win the game and your opponents can't lose the game. On its own, perfectly fine. It's an undercosted flying trampler, flampler, if you will, saying you can't win the game and your opponents can't lose the game. The downside to this is if you give everybody a copy of it, none of them can win or lose the game, but you can win the game, right? So none of them can lose the game because each opponent has a copy of Abyssal Persecutor. Not only that, but you're potentially looking at 3 turns of a flampler, a 6/6 flampler coming at you, right? Is that the kind of heat that we want to draw? right? Aggressive mining, on the other hand, is exactly where we want to be at. And I'm going to pop this over to Mox Field so that we prevent some eye burn and can add these directly to the deck. Aggressive mining is more where I want to be at with, bad stuff that can be good if your opponents have it, because it's a 4-mana enchantment that says you can't play lands. It says sacrifice a land to draw 2 cards, activated only once a turn. Objectively, this is a bad card, so giving your opponents copies of it is pretty good. Also, being an enchantment means that it's a little bit tougher to get rid of than your average card, because colors like black and red don't have a lot of ways to deal with enchantments. Blue can only deal with enchantments through bounce, so we want to take a look at things like that. All right, I think aggressive mining is a great addition in here. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of these. Skip your draw step on Kolfinur's plans. Comes into play, remove the top 7 cards of your library from the game face down. You may look at and play them. You can't play more than 1 spell each turn. Ooh, I kind of like this one too because it says skip your draw step. It gives your opponent access to 7 additional cards, but they can only play 1 a turn, right? I don't think I've seen anybody play this card ever, meaning it's perfect for this deck, right? If we give somebody Kolfinur's plans, we're giving them a bunch of options, but they're stuck casting 1 spell a turn. That's pretty yikes. I like it. All right. Let's see. You can't. But these are all big upsides. See, Experimental Frenzy is another one that if it didn't have a way to get rid of it, so Experimental Frenzy is another red enchantment. Red rare enchantments, they're always janky. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play the top card of your library. You can't play cards from your hand. All right? I mean, pretty decent if you can get a good run of cards off the top of your library. Giving this to an opponent means if they get a land on top of their library, they're pretty stuck after they've played a land. But this one, unlike Aggressive Mining, has a way for you to pay 4 mana and blow it up. Okay? Granted, if somebody isn't playing red and doesn't have access to that red mana, chances are they won't be able to blow it up, but if they've got anything that makes any color of mana, like a Mana Confluence or a City of Brass or any kind of rock that creates any color of mana, like a Lantern, the one that turns all your lands into makes your lands tap for any color of mana, then they can just blow this up, and you've wasted your mana casting it. You wasted your mana casting Fractured Identity as well. All right, so we want to look for something that's a little bit harder to get rid of. All right, let's take a look at some of these other ones. Forbidden Crypt, for instance, 5-mana enchantment. Whenever you would draw a card, instead return target card from your graveyard to your hand. If you can't, you lose the game. It's not bad. I like that. Whenever a card would be put into your graveyard, instead remove that card from the game. Ooh, okay. Forbidden Crypt's a little spicy. I like this one because what we could do is include some graveyard removal, just some incidental graveyard removal, like Relic of Progenitus that exiles all graveyards. And we'll take a look at that in a second. But what we could do is cast Fractured Identity on Forbidden Crypt, hold priority, and exile all graveyards with Relic of Progenitus, or even just let it resolve, then exile all graveyards with Relic of Progenitus, and ensure that your opponents can't cast a spell, or they move to their draw step and they lose from having empty graveyards. Thank you very much, Mike. Yes, hashtag blame Chris. It is everywhere. All right, so Forbidden Crypt's a card that I really like in this deck. I think that it's interesting, and it's exactly what we want to go for. These lesser used cards that have really bad drawbacks that we want to give to our opponents. All right, so EDH beats, you recommended Grid Monitor. Grid Monitor, 4 mana, 4/6. You can't play creature spells. Love it. Chef's kiss. All right. I mean, this ensures that you've got a 4/6 that doesn't immediately die to your opponent's 4/6s, and they can bounce them off each other forever. Just be careful, because if you give your opponents a copy of this, expect to have at least one 4/6 coming at you every turn. You're going to draw a lot of hate. I like it. It's a suitable downside that kind of insulates you, but hey, it's exactly what we're looking for. All right. Hedonist Trove is a little expensive. When it enters the battlefield, exile all cards from target opponent's graveyard. You may play land cards exiled with Hedonist Trove. You may play non-land cards. You can't cast more than one spell this way, but it still lets them draw cards and still lets them cast spells. I would say not bad enough. All right. Let's see. Let's see what Infernal Denizen says. I can't read that without blowing it up, so give me a second. Infernal Denizen. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice 2 swamps. If you can't, tap it, and an opponent may gain control of a creature you control of their choice. And it says tap, gain control of target creature for as long as it remains on the battlefield. Interesting. I think that's only good if you can guarantee none of your opponents are playing swamps. But being 8 mana for a 5/7, that means that opponents can steal stuff from everyone else. Again, I don't like it enough. It's not bad enough. All right. Let's see. The Lich cards are really interesting. All right. Woo! Did not realize that original Lich was a $300 card. A lot of people really like this in Commander. There's an entire Lich gang out there that likes building around this card. 4 mana, all black, enchantment. As Lich enters the battlefield, you lose life equal to your life total. You don't lose the life for having 0 or less life. If you would gain life, draw that many cards instead. When you're dealt damage, sacrifice that many non-token permanents. If you can't, you lose the game. When Lich is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you lose the game. All right. So a few things to absorb there with the Liches is when it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, meaning you can get around this because Fractured Identity exiles. Okay, that's not bad. But the bad part about OG Lich is you lose life equal to your life total. Right? If you lose life equal to your life total, you have 0 life. You can't gain life. If you were to exile this, you would lose the game anyway. So OG Lich, not so much. Lich's Mastery, on the other hand, also has this text: when Lich's Mastery leaves the battlefield, you lose the game. So while there are good drawbacks here that we'd want to give to our opponents, we can't play it with Fractured Identity. Because if we get rid of it, if we exile it with Fractured Identity, we lose the game anyway. All right. Oops. All right, not that great. Okay. Moderation is another one that I talked about in my short that I released today. 3 mana enchantment, recently released in Modern Horizons 2. Arguably a bad card, saying you can't cast more than 1 spell each turn. When you cast a spell, draw a card. Okay, it's a way to slow your opponents down pretty significantly, especially decks that rely on casting more than 1 spell each turn. Moderation is a good include here, especially because it's already in blue and white, the colors that we're in for Fractured Identity. So it's something that we'll want to consider. Okay, ensuring that our opponents only get to cast 1 spell each turn is a great drawback, even if. Yeah, Dragonkin, we'll take a look at that. Onin Fools, we'll take a look at that 100%. So again, moderation, we want to slow down the pace of play of our opponents. And whenever we cast a spell, we draw a card, or whenever the owner of the enchantment casts a spell, they draw a card. Again, I think it's a suitable drawback here. All right, so let's take a look at these. Again, some of the downsides of having the creatures with these drawbacks is that they can still attack you with these creatures. Save for Rust Elemental, which a couple of people, EDH Beats and Onin Fools, have both mentioned, and we'll take a look at right here. We're getting to it, fam. But these creatures here mean that they can still attack you with these creatures. If you give them a White Elephant gift, and none of these are white elephants, unfortunately, they can still attack you with that, then they can still take you out. You're still giving them a big body that they can attack with. All right, let's see. Roots of Wisdom, mill 3 cards. If you can't draw a card, no, that's an upside. So Rust Elemental is the one everybody has been talking about in chat there. Rust Elemental is 4 mana for a 4/4 flyer. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice an artifact other than Rust Elemental. If you can't, tap Rust Elemental and you lose 4 life. All right? Again, great. It's a way to eat away, to rust, if you will, your opponent's artifacts. If they're playing artifact mana, if they're playing, the big splashy artifact creatures, it's a good way to get rid of them over time. They can't get rid of Rust Elemental, meaning that they're going to slowly lose artifacts and then start losing life, but it still gives them a 4/4 flyer to attack with. They could block with it. There's no reason why an opponent wouldn't block another opponent's Rust Elemental with this. I like it. It's cute. I wish they didn't kill each other if they attacked into each other. If they were 4/5s instead of 4/4s, or if we can guarantee that our opponents aren't making treasure tokens or food tokens or clue tokens, that's a pretty easy way to feed the Rust Elemental. All right. So let's see. Steel Golem is another one that's been recommended here as well. You can't play creature or artifact spells, so you can't cast creature spells. So much akin to Grid Monitor. And like Grid Monitor, bounces off of each other, being a 3/4. Okay, so this is another one that just says you can't play creature spells. I like it in the deck. However, be careful about players with sacrifice outlets, because you might give everybody one of these and they might immediately sacrifice it. You set back one person at the table, maybe. They've got artifact destruction. You aren't setting them back at all. All right. So let's see. What else do we have here? Yawgmoth's Agenda. Play no more than 1 spell each turn. You may play cards in your graveyard as though they were in your hand. If a card would be put into your graveyard from anywhere, remove it from the game instead. All right. I mean, this is a big upside card here. Being able to recycle cards in your graveyard and then also cast spells from your hand. Sure, it limits you to 1 spell each turn, but we've seen a few more that are a little bit more limiting in this way. This one also doesn't lose our opponents the game. I would say that the drawback here isn't bad enough on it. All right. So what do we think? There are a few others in here that we might want to take a look at. There was a great recommendation for Form of the Dragon. Let's see. Form of the Dragon. Form of the Dragon, originally released in Scourge. I remember this one all the way back when. But it's an enchantment for 7 mana, 4 red, red, red. At the beginning of your upkeep, Form of the Dragon deals 5 damage to any target. Easy, right? Sounds pretty good on its own. At the beginning of each end step, your life total becomes 5. There's the downside. And then creatures without flying can't attack you. All right? This one is pretty decent. This one gets into a guns against each other standoff here, right? This is a 3-way standoff. If everybody's life total becomes 5, except for yours, because you're giving it away, ideally the same turn you cast it, then the first player shoots the second player, and then the third player shoots the first player, leaving only you and one player with 5 mana, unless the rest of the players at the table decide to truce and aim that 5 damage at you all the time. MJ, thank you very much for coming out. Really appreciate it. Form of the Dragon, really interesting, but we're looking at giving it away. So, I mean, having everybody have 5 life is pretty decent. Dropping everybody's life total to 5 it is all right. Just be careful, because if you cast this and then you try to Fractured Identity it away on the same turn, which again is 12 mana, including blue, white, red, red, red in there. If you can't, or if somebody counters your Fractured Identity, your life total becomes 5, and you can be attacked by flyers. That one is rough. All right, I like it. I think it's cute, but we might see whether it's worthwhile. There's another recommendation from Onin Fools for Midnight Oil. Midnight Oil is another good one. Midnight Oil, 4 mana enchantment out of Aether Revolt, or Kaladesh rather. Midnight Oil enters the battlefield with 7 hour counters at it. At the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card and remove 2 hour counters from Midnight Oil. Your maximum hand size is equal to the number of counters on Midnight Oil. When you discard a card, you lose 1 life. Alright, so it draws your opponent's cards, and it doesn't start hurting them until a couple of turns into the game. But then, unless they can get rid of it, unless they spend removal to get rid of this Midnight Oil, they're really going to start hurting themselves. And after 3 turns, their hand size is going to be 1. And they're going to be drawing 2 cards every turn. I like it because it starts out like a group slug card, and then, starts out like a group hug card, and then turns into a group slug card. Really interesting. I like it. I do. I think it's worth a shot in here. All right. So what else? Plus every card in EDH draws your opponent's cards. So yeah, exactly. There's a lot of ways to draw cards and to draw your opponent's cards, and that's really what this deck is going to be. It's going to be like you're my friend until you're not kind of thing. A lot like the Archelos build that we did last week as well. And closer to the end of the stream, I'll talk about that one. But this is a card that we want in here. The other one is, let's go over here and go to our advanced search. Lose the game. So let's take a look at all of the ones that say you lose the game here. All of the permanents that say you lose the game. All right. So we'll take a look at some of the cards in here. So we've got a couple of sorceries, but we want to take a look at permanents that say you lose the game. Enduring Angel, flying, double strike, 5 mana, 3 white pips. You have hexproof. If your life total would be reduced to 0 or less, instead transform Enduring Angel, and your life total becomes 3. Then, if it didn't transform this way, you lose the game. Alright, and it becomes a flying hexproof, power and toughness equal to your life total, and when it attacks, double your life total. I think that that's more benefit than downside, unfortunately. I think it's really cute with the lose the game thing, but you would have to destroy it in response to it flipping. So you'd have to drop your opponent's life total, you would have to then destroy it as well. I think it's just a lot here. All right. So we've got Forbidden Crypt already. We've got a bunch that are you don't lose the game, you can't lose the game. Some instants that say you lose the game. Immortal Coil. Let's take a look at this one. 4 mana artifact, tap, exile 2 cards from your graveyard, draw a card. If damage would be dealt to you, prevent that damage, exile a card from your graveyard for each 1 damage prevented this way. If there are no cards in your graveyard, you lose the game. This is what I'm talking about. All right, this is the kind of one that says you are on a clock. If you give this to your opponents, sure, they're thinking, okay, I can reduce my my graveyard to draw a card here. That's an upside. But then they realize that the more damage they end up taking, the more they've got to remove from their graveyard. And if we include graveyard removal, like we were talking about earlier, then this becomes another... we can give it to everybody, then exile their graveyards and just win the game. All right? I like that a lot. I think it is great, especially in conjunction, like I mentioned, with Forbidden Crypt and a graveyard removal that we might include there. All right, so more instants, more sorceries, the Liches. Let's take a look at Lich's Mirror. If you would lose the game, instead shuffle your hand, your graveyard, and all permanents into your library. Draw 7 cards, and your life total becomes 20. Again, that's all upside there, unfortunately. Lich's Tomb, you don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. When you lose life, sacrifice a permanent for each 1 life you lost. Lich's Tomb sounds interesting. Alright, so Lich's Tomb is just potentially sacrifice all of your permanents, the more damage you're dealt. If you give everybody a Lich's Tomb and they have no way to get rid of it, they sacrifice their permanents until the last permanent they have is Lich's Tomb. They still lose all of the life, take all of the damage that they would normally lose, but they don't lose life, or they don't lose the game for having less than 0 life. Once they sacrifice Lich's Tomb, then they lose the game. So this is another one that's really interesting. It could get us some longevity down the road, but it's also a way to give it to our opponent and turn it into a ticking clock for them. All right. Let's see. So we talked about the Liches. 9 lives is another one. So 9 lives has hexproof. If a source would deal damage to you, prevent that damage and put an incarnation counter on 9 lives. When there are 9 or more incarnation counters on 9 lives, exile it. When 9 lives leaves the battlefield, you lose the game. Okay, so this is another maybe death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing. If you're able to do 9 increments of 1 damage to each of your opponents, if you've given them a 9 lives, they lose the game. Or again, if you attack somebody with 9 creatures, or we could do something like destroy all enchantments and give it to them, and no matter how many incarnation counters are or aren't on 9 lives, if we get rid of that 9 lives, again, we can't target it directly because it has hexproof, but if we get rid of 9 lives somehow, they lose the game. Right? So this is one that could do us good. But then we can't Fractured Identity it, because it's when it leaves the battlefield you lose the game. Damn, I got so excited about this one, but we would lose the game if we Fractured Identity it. That's rough. That's a shame. All right, let's see. We've got a few more instants and sorceries. Let's take a look at Soul Echo out of Mirage. Soul Echo enters the battlefield with X Echo counters on it. You don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Soul Echo if there are no counters on it. Otherwise, target opponent may choose that for each 1 damage that would be dealt to you until your next upkeep. You remove an Echo counter on it instead. So that doesn't cause opponents to lose the game, unfortunately. It just delays them from losing the game. That's a shame. I would have liked to have been able to give opponents a copy of this with 0 counters on it. If it said that if there are no Soul counter, or if there are no Echo counters on Soul Echo, they lose the game, that'd be a shame. Right. Let's see. Transcendence. You don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. When you have 20 or more life, you lose the game. That's when you have 20 or more life. So when is that checked? If your life total is 20 or more and you control an effect that states you can't lose the game, there is an infinite loop formed. If neither player wants to end the loop by removing one of these 2 cards from the battlefield, the game ends in a draw. Interesting. So we could include something like Lich's Tomb and Transcendence and just draw the game as we check. You lose, you don't lose, you check, you lose, you don't lose. And unfortunately, that is one of those game states that we just don't like. But it seems like it's just a state-based check if you have 20 or more life. Whenever you lose life, you gain 2 life. So because our format starts with 40 life, if we dropped below 20 life, played Transcendence, and then cast Fractured Identity on it, anybody we give this to with 20 or more life immediately loses the game. Again, that's 11 mana to do, including blue and 4 white pips. But for something that says you lose, or each opponent loses the game, I think that's pretty interesting. And I think that it's something that not a lot of people see. Right? What do you think, chat? Let me know out there what you think about some of our additions so far. What do you like best? What do you like worst? Do you have any recommendations? I do want to take a moment and remind everybody that I have made affiliate here on the channel, meaning you can subscribe. You can subscribe. You get access to a couple of cool emotes. I've got a few that are still in approval stages right now. But if you want to support the channel, even throwing me a Prime sub would be fantastic. I really appreciate it, and helps me keep doing this every week as well. All right. Thank you very much. All right. Cool. If you beautiful people are still out there listening, let me know. They're in chat. All right, and we'll get to it. Okay, so we want to look for a few more permanents that are ideally bad, have bad drawbacks, but are good if each of our opponents have those drawbacks, right? Ones that don't maybe make us immediately lose the game, but significantly hamper us. There's one in particular that I got with a while ago, and it is called, it's an enchantment called Pyromancer's something. I think it's Pyromancer's Swath. Here it is. It says, if an instant or sorcery you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage +2 to that permanent or player instead. At the beginning of each end step, discard your hand. Okay. Now, I played Tomer of MTG Goldfish and his Zedru deck, and he gave me Pyromancer's Swath. And that discard happens at the end of each end step. Meaning, if you Fractured Identity this to each opponent on your turn, at the end of your turn, they all discard their hands. Okay? And that means that they've only got the one card in hand that they draw for their turn, or however many cards that they might be drawing on their turns in order to do something with. That upside, dealing 2 damage, is only really good if they've got instants or sorceries that deal damage, meaning if they're running a burn deck, but you don't see a lot of burn in Commander. And the fact that they're in top deck mode immediately from this is pretty decent, right? It means that it's really hit or miss. It slows the game down significantly. Your opponents might not appreciate it, but that's kind of the vibe of this deck, right? We kind of want to give people permanents that they don't want copies of. That's what we're trying to do here. All right. So what else are we looking at? What other downsides would we have in this? Right. I think that we've got a couple good payoffs right now, which we might even trim down from this point. So let's look at other ways. Okay. So Drakenkin, you say Maskwood Nexus and was it Tyrant of Jund? So, Karthus Tyrant of Jund. Karthus Tyrant of Jund, 7 mana, flying haste. When Karthus Tyrant of Jund enters the battlefield, gain control of all dragons, then untap all dragons. Other dragon creatures you control have haste. You say that you want Maskwood Nexus in here, give everybody a copy of Maskwood Nexus, then we cast Karthus and gain control of all creatures in play. It is a roundabout way of casting an insurrection, let's say. So we'll add that in for the time being. Let's go Maskwood Nexus to show everybody what Maskwood Nexus is. Maskwood Nexus is a fancy little 4-mana enchantment that my friend Quad9s is a big fan of, saying creatures you control are every creature type. Same said for spells and creatures that you own that aren't on the battlefield. All right. Logan, yeah, right. You're telling me that you haven't seen these cards. My butt, my friend. But if we do something like Fractured Identity on Maskwood Nexus, and then we cast Karthus, Tyrant of Jund, then we gain control of everything on the battlefield. Right? Every creature on the battlefield. Like I said, this is like an insurrection effect. Insurrection. And here we go, untap all creatures and gain control of them until end of turn. They gain haste until end of turn. That's only until end of turn, but it's still basically the same effect. You gain control of everything. Everything gets to attack, right? So interesting inclusion there, Drakenkin. All right. So with Fractured Identity being the hidden commander in this deck. Now that we've got our payoff cards, or we will have our payoff cards, what we want to do is find out ways that we can pull Fractured Identity out of the deck, and then see how many times we can cast Fractured Identity. The big thing here is that Fractured Identity doesn't exile itself like a lot of other big splashy effects would. Okay, so we would want to maybe include some tutors in the deck for instants and sorceries. and ways to pull cards out of our graveyard so that we can recast them. Okay? I don't like packing my decks too full of tutors, but if they are hidden commander decks like this is, then including a couple of them, like the demonic tutors that let us go search for anything, and vampiric tutor, which thankfully was reprinted in Commander Legends, but is still a $60 card. Whew boy. They're good additions. Mystical tutor, because we know that we're going to be in blue, is another ad here. Let's change the printing so we know how much this is. Switch printing. Let's go to EMA here. So another $30 card. These tutors are really expensive, y'all. But they're great ways for us to go get Fractured Identity. One of the things that we might want to include as well is Enlightened Tutor, because a lot of these payoffs that we have are artifacts and enchantments. All right, so let's switch to the EMA printing here. Oh, EMA printing is even more expensive. Interesting. Okay, but it lets us go put an instant or sorcery, or sorry, an artifact or enchantment on top of our library. Right? Not bad if we're, you know, going to find that leveler, or if we're going to go get that Lich's Tomb and give all of our opponents a copy of Lich's Tomb. Right? Really interesting. I like it a lot. Okay. The other things that we can do are return instants and sorceries from our graveyard to our hand with an Archaeomancer. Right? So Archaeomancer, when it enters the battlefield, return an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. That's great if your Fractured Identity gets countered or milled. You still have a chance to get it. Okay. Personal Tutor. Let's see here. Personal Tutor. Personal Tutor. $100 card. Muffins. You got expensive taste. But it's a 1-mana sorcery. Search for a sorcery card. Reveal it. Shuffle your library. Put it on top. $100. I mean, I did just advocate putting like $60 cards in the deck. So we'll throw it in the list. Money's no object here. But Merchant Scroll. I think that only gets instants, right? No, yeah, it's only searches for instants. So unfortunately, it can't grab our Fractured Identity. Okay. Yeah, exactly. There are a lot of cards that are a lot of money, my dude. Let's see, switch printing. It's only been reprinted in Portal. Or it's only been printed in Portal. It's only got one printing. Thankfully, it's not as expensive as Imperial Seal, which only has one printing and a Judge printing as well, which is like a $600 card at this point. North of that, $700. Now my curiosity is perked. Imperial Seal. Imperial Seal, get ready for it. $650! Woo! That's an expensive card, y'all. But it is a search your library for any card, put it on top, you lose 2 life. Glad that Personal Tutor is not that expensive, but unless we see some kind of reprint to some of these Portal cards soon, they're going to keep climbing up and up and up. Unfortunately, reserve list. So, whatever, it's a thing. All right, so what other ways do we have to return instants and sorceries from our graveyard to our hand, to rebuy these? We can do something like Snapcaster Mage as well. Snapcaster Mage lets us cast something out of our graveyard, but note that when we cast it out of our graveyard, we have to exile it, meaning we don't get it again. That's the downside of casting something out of our graveyard as opposed to returning it to our hand from our graveyard, is that it's the last time that we're going to cast it. This is a deck where we may want to cast Fractured Identity 3 or 4 times if we can. So let's see. Oh, yeah, you know, Logan, if we saw some kind of Imperial Seal reprint, even in like a secret layer, I would take it. Even in the list, even though I know the list does nothing significant to prices, any kind of reprint would be perfect. Exactly what we need. Oh, it'll never be in standard. Absolutely. Which is why the list or a secret layer would be the best places to find it. Right? Best places to find it. All right. So how else are we rebuying Fractured Identity? Okay. And then how else are we potentially winning the game if we can't do Fractured Identity? Those are the two angles that I want to take a look at next. Let's see. There's a card with flashback that can return it. Let's see. Red and blue. The art is a big book. So let's go over here and go to our friends at Scryfall. Return target instant or... so let's see. We've got Mystic Retrieval. Return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. And again, sorry for the eye burn. I'm going to jump all of this over to our friends here at Moxfield. We'll go Advanced Search. Okay, so we've got our Archaeomancer. Call to Mind. Return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. This is a one-time effect, 3 mana. Pretty alright. Flood of Recollection. Return target instant or sorcery to your hand. Exile Flood of Recollection. Again, these are things that we want. When Izzet Chronomancer enters the battlefield, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. It's a little bit more expensive than Archaeomancer. I think Archaeomancer is kind of the gold standard. No pun intended, because Izzet Chronarch is actually gold for what we want for returning stuff to our hand. How about cards that shuffle your graveyard back into your deck? That just means that we have to go looking for it again. If we found it and it's in our graveyard, let's do something with that. All right. Living Lightning, return target instant or sorcery when it dies. That's interesting. Mnemonic Wall is another classic. 5 mana for a 0/4. When it enters the battlefield, return an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. Mystic Retrieval, 4 mana, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand with flashback. Muffins, that might be the one that you were talking about there, but I love it. Let's see. Relearn, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Great. All fantastic. Let's see. We've got an Exploit one that does the same. Salvager of Secrets for 5 mana does the same. Scribe of the Mindful does it if you sacrifice it. Shipwreck Dowser, another 5 mana with Prowess that does it. Spellkeeper Weird sacrifices itself. Spellpire Phoenix. Let's see. Romage, Reclaimer, 5 mana, Vexing Scuttler, 8 with Emerge, and then Volcanic Visions. I think Volcanic Visions for 7 is a bit much. So I think we've got quite a few ways here we've added to our instants and sorceries to return Fractured Identity to our hand. Logan, you hit on the next thing that I want to take a look at, and that's protecting some of this stuff as well, with some removal. Or some protection, some kind of interaction. Narset's Reversal is perfect. So Narset's Reversal is our counter spell that doesn't counter. Instead, it bounces an instant or sorcery spell and then gives you a copy of it. So we could do something like cast Fractured Identity, hold priority, and Narset's Reversal our own Fractured Identity to get another copy of it and keep it in hand. So it turns it from a 5 mana spell to a 7 mana spell, but we immediately get to copy it again. We immediately get to cast it again. All right, keep it again. Right? So I think that that's fantastic. We also want to make sure that we aren't doing something that is just losing us our best card. We want to make sure that we're protecting, actually casting Fractured Identity. So we might want to do stuff that, as much as I'm loath to do it, includes some free counter spells in here. Maybe not the Force of Wills or the Force of Negations. Maybe the Pact of Negations. Maybe the Fierce Guardianships. That if we have our commander out, we can counter something. Because if we go all in on Fractured Identity and we cast it and somebody counters it, that's feel bads. We can go get it again, sure, but let's see. All right. Thank you, Big Richard, for the follow. Okay. So let's include Fierce Guardianship, even though we don't know what our commander is going to be yet, and let's include Pact of Negation. Pact of Negation is kind of the fairest free counter spell, in my opinion, because you do have to pay for it eventually. It's great the turn that you're going off, and for us, it's great if we're doing something like casting Fractured Identity on a Lich's Tomb, right? Or Fractured Identity on, Kolfenor's Plans. right? Or Fractured Identity on a Forbidden Crypt. Ideally, having our opponents lose the game on their turn. That's what we want to do. That's the kind of thing that we want to protect. So I like that. Dispel is a great one. It's just 1 mana and would prevent any instant speed interaction. Counter target instant spell. So if somebody tries to counter, we've got a counter spell. And if we end up going into green, which it doesn't look like we are, save for Karthus right now, I think Veil of Summer is a fantastic inclusion too. All right. Great. Thank you, Drakenkin, for the follow. All right. Excellent. Excellent. So we've got some tutors in here. We've got some protection for our cards. We've only got about 40 cards, and we haven't included the nuts and bolts yet, like our mana ramp or our card draw. We also want to ensure that we're including other ways in here that we could potentially be winning the game if all else fails. Here, I really like inclusions that are ticking clocks, ticking time bombs, something that deals damage every upkeep, for instance. Like, the easiest example is a Sulfurous Vortex. Sulfurous Vortex. Sulfurous Vortex is an enchantment that just says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, Sulfuric Vortex deals 2 damage to that player. And in this case, if there were 3 copies of it, everybody's losing 6 life at the beginning of their upkeep. If a player would gain life, prevent it. Right? Granted, that's going to hurt you, but it's going to hurt everybody else a lot sooner, a lot faster. It might make you a target, but it's going to make everybody else a target faster, because eliminating one of the players that you've given a Sulfuric Vortex to is going to be a way to ensure that they are being picked on, because if you eliminate them, you eliminate some of this damage that's dealt to you. Right? Interesting. Really interesting. Any other recommendations out there? Anything else come to mind in terms of one of those ticking time bomb cards that deals damage, say, at the beginning of everybody's upkeep, over time? You know, those ones that hurt everybody. The slug card, the group slug cards. All right, let me know what you think. We can start taking a look at some inspiration from a couple of other similar decks. Like I said, Zedru is a great one to take a look at. And I'm going to pop over to EDH Rec, and this is what I like doing in the building process. If I'm building something that, you know, you can't just go out there and take a look at another person's copy of or another person's deck list because you're doing something really weird and really unique. We can go and we can take a look at similar commanders and pull out individual cards from that. Before we pop over to EDH Rec, we got a couple of more recommendations here. Havoc Festival. Ooh, Havoc Festival is another good one. Havoc Festival, 6 mana, players can't gain life. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player loses half their life, rounded up. So in this case, this would be losing half their life, then half their life, then half their life. So at the beginning of each player's upkeep, they would be losing 3/4 of their life is the way that it works. Something like that. I think that that's really interesting. I like it personally. We've got a recommendation for Blood Clock as well, which is one that I don't know off the top of my head, but it's 4 mana artifact that says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player returns a permanent they control to its owner's hand unless they pay 2 life. So in this case, if we've got 3 copies of this in play, it would return 3 permanents to play unless they pay 2 life. You know, I like it. Yeah, if they had 40 life, they go down to 5. Woo! All right. So Blood Clock, I think, is along the kind of lines that we like here, but might not be as fast enough as we want. We really want that, like, untap, upkeep, gains over kind of thing. Right, Reign of Gore is one that comes to mind, but I think that is that player loses that much life instead. Okay, so that's not the one that I'm thinking of. Phyrexian Tyranny is Logan's recommendation here. Phyrexian Tyranny. Okay, so we're in Grixis. No wonder you knew it. Whenever a player draws a card, that player loses 2 life unless they pay 2. With 3 copies of this out, it's whenever a player draws a card, that player loses 6 life unless they pay 2 mana for every instance of that. I like that. That's like 6 damage every turn. Whew. That's a spicy one for just 3 mana. Right? It's not an instant game over, but it is like immediate clock on the game. I like that. Hey, Andy, good to see you. Thanks for coming out, my friend. We're just looking at bad cards that we want to give to our opponents. We are building a deck around Fractured Identity, and we want to look at cards that immediately put a clock on the game if you give everybody a copy of it. So what gets, exponentially big when, there are 3 copies of it in play. And we had some really good recommendations in here. Stuff that deals damage to everybody on upkeep, stuff that halves life totals on upkeeps. I like those recommendations a lot. Everybody is really knocking it out of the park. But in terms of my brew process, these are... The way that I go is I put some of my obvious inclusions in first, then I do a Scryfall search for something that has an effect that I like. Like we've seen, the you can'ts or you lose the game so that you can give it to other people. Then we add in some of our support, some of our tutors, some of our counter magic, some of our return spells from our graveyard to our hand. Then, if I'm looking to fill out the rest of the 20 cards in the deck before we get to our nuts and bolts, I like looking at other lists and taking inspiration from that. It's not copying lists directly, but what are other people including in other lists that do the kind of thing that we want to do? Are there any obvious inclusions? So here's where I hop over to everybody's favorite EDH rec. Okay, and I'm going to pop in Zedru because Zedru likes to give away permanents. And the next one that we're going to take a look at is Blim Comedic Genius, because Blim loves getting rid of permanents as well. Okay, and let's take a look at some of our top inclusions in here. 9 lives, like we mentioned. 9 lives is a bit different in Zedru because it doesn't leave play. Our Fractured Identity makes it leave play, meaning it would kill us if it leaves the battlefield. All right, let's see. What else do we want to give people here? Illusions of Grandeur is another one that is not great because in Zedru, we get the enters the battlefield effect and then give it to somebody else so that they get the leaves the battlefield effect. Meaning we pay 4 life to gain 20, or we pay 4 mana to gain 20, and then we give it to somebody else and they lose 20 when it leaves the battlefield. That's ideal here. We don't get that with Fractured Identity because we get the enters the battlefield, we get the leaves the battlefield when we exile it, then everybody else gets the enters the battlefield as well, negating the benefit of that. Now, of course, Aggressive Mining, we already included that in the list. But let's see what else that we want to give to people. Steel Golem, that's in our list. Rust Elemental, that's in our list. Grid Monitor, that's in our list. Looks like we've got a lot of the good ones. Moderation, that's in our list. We got some of them right away. Not bad at all. Right, let's see. Golden Knight Castigator, Flying Haste. If a source would deal damage to you, it deals double that damage instead. If a source would deal damage to Golden Knight Castigator, it deals double that damage instead. It's all right, but again, do you want to give somebody 4/9 Flying Haste that can be attacking you? All right, let's see. Anything else? Let's hop down to enchantments. There's Pyromancer Swath. Hey, that's the one that I was talking about. Tomer got me with that one good once. Let's see. Delusions of Mediocrity, Imprisoned in the Moon, Solitary Confinement. Not really one that we want to be giving away on this one because they can just not pay for it. Transcendence, we included that already. Excellent. Thought Lash. Here's one that I didn't think of. Thought Lash says, cumulative upkeep, remove the top card of your library from the game. If you do not remove your library from the game and bury Thought Lash, then you can pay 0 to remove the top card of your library from the game to prevent the damage to you. This is perfect. Are we going to be fractured identitying any repercussions? Maybe. We don't have a lot of way to deal damage to creatures. But let's take a look at repercussions. So let's take a look at repercussions to know what Logan's talking about in chat. 3 mana enchantment. that says whenever a creature is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to that creature's controller. Imagine if there were 3 of those in play. Imagine. Dealing 1 damage to a creature would deal 3 damage to its controller. That's pretty decent. That's pretty good. I like that, but we would need to include ways to deal damage to creatures unless we just want our opponents to incidentally be running creatures into each other. All right, so it's something that we might want to consider. We definitely want to be putting our shields up in a deck like this, be very defensive, so we might look at some ways to prevent us from being attacked, too, when we get to our nuts and bolts. But I'll keep it on the maybe list, I say as I don't add it to the list. There we go. So we've added repercussions to the list. So let's continue to look at Zedru. We added in Thought Lash because Thought Lash is great. You give it to your opponent and it slowly kills them. First they remove 1 card, then 2 cards, then 3 cards. And if Thought Lash leaves, if you can't pay for Thought Lash or you choose not to pay for Thought Lash, it exiles your library. Right? Not bad. Prevents damage to you. You can exile your own library to prevent damage to you, but it's another one of those you need to deal with this. Okay, I like it. There's Form of the Dragon. Great. Excellent. Stellar. We've got that already. Let's see. Then there's... Okay, so there's definitely some Chaos cards that we can include in here. Confusion in the Ranks, for instance. Right? Let's see. Hive Mind is another weird one. Bitter Feud is another weird one. However, if we Bitter Feud and give it to everybody, they get to choose the opponents on it. And that could be bad for us. Oh, yeah. Logan, definitely like Light Mine Field and Power Stone Minefield. Those are great defensive cards. So let's go Mine. And we'll look at these ones. So, Light Mine Field. Whenever 1 or more creatures attacks, Light Mine Field deals damage to each of those creatures equal to the number of attacking creatures. 1 on its own means that a 1/1 attacking on its own dies. Everything else just takes a bit of damage. But if you have 3 of these in play, one attacking creature deals 3 damage to itself. That's pretty decent. Okay, I like that. We'll include that for now. And then Power Stone Minefield is this one here. Whenever a creature attacks, Power Stone Minefield deals 2 damage to it. Okay, another good one. If we want to do this and start dealing damage to creatures, Aether Flash is another good one as well. Aether Flash, I know my buddy Sean Cormy in chat really likes this one, but whenever a creature enters the battlefield, Aether Flash deals 2 damage to it. If you've got 3 copies of this in play, a creature entering the battlefield immediately takes 6 damage, right? That's pretty all right. It's a great way to ensure that the only thing on the field is going to be big creatures. Okay, I like that one a lot. Let's take a look at our utility artifacts here as well. And no, Muffins, humility does not go in any of these decks. Nice try. Woo! That ain't happening. Okay. Now, we could do group huggy stuff in this deck as well. Like, we can give away Howling Mines and Font of Mythos and a whole bunch of that kind of stuff. If that's the approach that we wanted to take. It does get pretty crazy when everybody's drawing an additional 6 cards on their turns. Right? But is that really the approach that we want to take in this one? Maybe not. All right. So the other one that I wanted to take a look at is Blim Comedic Genius. So Blim Comedic Genius. Blim here is a Rakdos legend out of Commander Legends, 4/3 flyer. When Blim deals damage to a player, that player gains control of a permanent you control. Then each player loses life and discards cards equal to the number of permanents they control but don't own. So Blim's a card that we might want in the 99 here to give away some of these maybe not so good cards. But Blim also has a lot of these cards that are given away, like Demonic Lore. Demonic Lore is one that I didn't even think of. Okay, Demonic Lore. When Demonic Lore enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards. At the beginning of your end step, you lose 2 life for each card in your hand. Okay, that's good if you can draw it and then get rid of it as well, but it does have an enters the battlefield effect that draws 3 cards. Dragonkin, you are recommending Captive Audience. So Captive Audience is Rakdos enchantment for 7 mana. When it enters the battlefield, under the control of an opponent of your choice. This is one of the reasons why I didn't immediately include it in the list, is because when you give it to your opponents, they give it to somebody else immediately. So this enters, goes to somebody else, then you fractured identity it, and everybody else gets a copy, but then they decide where that goes. You could potentially be ending up with 2 copies of Captive Audience on yourself with this. Right? I like the options that mean that somebody is stuck with a card. This is essentially they give it to somebody else. Great recommendation. I like it, but this gives itself away immediately, which is kind of what we want to do here, but not fractured identity target. All right. So Demonic Lore. Demonic Lore is kind of along the same lines, except it does have that enters the battlefield effect of drawing 3 cards. And I don't know, it might not be great. The Leech Cycle, the ANC, is a good recommendation here as well. Let's take a look at the Leech Cycle. The Leech Cycle, however, has this effect of potentially locking people out of the game. And that's not fun. That's not fun or neat. For instance, maybe it's not because it's white spells, not all spells you cast. Okay. So white spells you cast cost 1 more to cast. So the Leech Cycle isn't great if you're giving it to somebody that doesn't have white spells to cast, for instance. Right? It just gives them a 1/3. Right? Same with the rest of the leeches, like Jade Leech here. 4 mana for a 5/5 green spells cast 1 more, cast green more. If they don't have green mana or they don't have green in their color identity, you're just giving them a 5/5. Not fantastic. Okay. How many of the identity targets are enchantments or artifacts? Quite a bit. We've got quite a few. How about running something like Hall of Heliod's Generosity or Academy Ruins to rebuy these targets if they get countered or removed? I like it. I like where your head's at. So Academy Ruins. Especially because Academy Ruins doesn't exactly take up a spot in our deck because it is a land. And we can pay 2 to put an artifact from our graveyard on top of our library. And Hall of Heliod's Generosity is the same, but for enchantments. So we can pay 1 white and put an enchantment from our graveyard on top of our library. This is perfect. This is exactly what we want if our targets get milled somehow or countered. Okay. 9 lives, Patrician's. So we already talked about 9 lives. 9 lives isn't great because Fractured Identity exiles the card from play. And if we exile 9 lives from play, that trigger goes on the stack. Sure, we can respond to it by then destroying all enchantments and having everybody else's triggers to lose the game go on the stack. But I'd rather we make a deck that at least gives our opponents some kind of out to these kind of things as well. Maybe not, maybe, but making something a 3-card combo as opposed to a 2-card combo is just a little bit much. Especially if it's another spell that you have to cast holding priority. So let's hop back over to Blim. All right, let's see. Marketplace from Dragonkin. Marketplace? What's Marketplace? Marketplace. No Marketplace. What are you talking about? All right. Okay, so let's see. So we've got Immortal Coil. Hey, there's the card that we were just talking about. Steel Golem, already in the list. We don't want to give everybody a copy of Abyssal Persecutor, of course. Ebon Drake. Whenever a player plays a spell, you lose 1 life. That's okay. That's okay. Let's see. I could potentially be doing a lot of damage in a turn cycle, and it's just a creature. Wretched Anorid is another one. I've had copies of this kicking around since I played in the original Onslaught block, but whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you lose 1 life. I like these, but again, they're just bad cards. Demonic Taskmaster is a good one. Flying at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature unless you, other than Demonic Taskmaster. But again, you're giving your opponents a 4/3 flyer. And that is just going to come at you. So Marketplace. No Marketplace here either, the AMC. All right. So Wretched Anorid. So again, these are creatures that are okay only if we're giving them away, and we don't want to include too many creatures that are just good if we're giving them away. We have our targets for Fractured Identity. All right. So let's get on to our nuts and bolts at this point. Let's get on to what's in the rest of the deck that makes the rest of the deck tick. Okay, so we've got some of our instants and sorceries in here. Let's include, well, I mean, at this point, let's narrow down our color identity. So we've got every color in here, and we've got just a tiny bit of green at this point, just from Karthus, Tyrant of Jund. All right, meaning we probably want to cut Karthus as much as the Drakenkin really loves that combo. Let's cut Karthus so that we can keep our color identity to red, blue, white, black. So we're going to be greenless in this. Inventor's Fair. Inventor's Fair. So Inventor's Fair, or Inventor's Unfair, as I like to call it. That's my Logan joke for the day. Is a land that says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more artifacts, you gain 1 life, and it's 4, tap, sacrifice it, go get an artifact. Okay? Especially when some of our stuff like Immortal Coil or Lich's Tomb are our targets for Fractured Identity. I like this because this, or it can go grab us a leveler as well. I like it. So we're cutting Maskwood Nexus, and we're going to be cutting Insurrection as well. That was in there as an example. So again, we're in a greenless build at this point. All right, great. So we've got some of our targets here. Let's look at some of our maybe less desirable targets that we've put in here for Fractured Identity. Okay. So some cards that are only good if we give them away are what we want to be thinking about here, or eliminating. Moderation can be okay if we have it. Oh, sorry. I'm just gonna go back and hit the music again. So Fractured Identity, so Pyromancer Swath is only good if we Fracture Identity it. We don't want it to last a turn in play. Some of the other cards that we want to keep in this deck are cards that we don't mind having in play. Otherwise, they're dead cards without Fractured Identity. All right. Can we donate or harmless offering some of this stuff? Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't want too big of a saturation of stuff that we want to give away, though, because I want to be able to target and go get the 2 or 3 things that we actually want to give away. Like, for instance, we aren't casting Rust Elemental if we aren't Fractured Identitying. So I want to remove that. Okay? Grid Monitor, we can absolutely cast and just have in play. It's a 4/6 for 4. As long as we don't want to cast more creatures, it's perfectly fine. Perfectly cromulent, as they might say. Leveler, again, only good if we're Fractured Identitying it. But it's one of those play it, Fractured Identity, we win kind of thing. Steel Golem along the same sides as Grid Monitor. All right, decent. I do like Donate, and I do like Harmless Offering. We'll probably put those in here. But let's make some cuts. So Immortal Coil is another, hey, we win the game. Lich's Tomb is another, hey, we win the game. I like that. Kolfinor's Plans is potentially players can't cast spells anymore, which is great. Demonic Pact, again, we said, has a little bit too long of a life cycle to actually lose the game. Even though we wouldn't mind having it in play for a couple of turns, it's still potentially one that we'd want to get rid of. And I don't mean just slide it over to somebody else. Forbidden Crypt is another great one, decent if it's in play for us, because we can use it to, say, return Fractured Identity from our graveyard to our hand. Forbidden Crypt essentially is if Fractured Identity is in our graveyard, we play Forbidden Crypt, We redraw the Fractured Identity, then give Forbidden Crypt to everybody else. It's perfect. I love it. Then we've got our clocks, the Havoc Festivals, our Sulfuric Vortexes. Again, I think Pyromancer Swath is a little too dangerous for us to have in here, even though it's decent. Thought Lash is one that can at least draw out the game a little bit further. We do have 100 cards. It's something that we can use to prevent that damage, exiling cards, and then give it away when we don't need it anymore. Ninja Bow, sorry. Captive Audience is not decent because when it enters the battlefield, you give it away to somebody else. And the way Fractured Identity is worded, if we give everybody a copy of Captive Audience, they then get to choose who it goes to. So we play Captive Audience, it goes to somebody else. We Fractured Identity it, and we get one copy. Then our other two opponents get a copy. We could potentially end up with 2 copies of Captive Audience on ourselves and only giving away 1, and that's going to do more harm than good. Okay. Sorry to repeat myself on that one. All right, Midnight Oil is another fine one. Transcendence is another one that we don't really want to cast unless it's everybody loses the game. But it's another one of those like, hey, 11 mana and the game's over. I like it. Form of the Dragon's a little bit risky because we could just be attacked with a 5-power flyer. And we know that a lot of people in the community have dragon decks, so potentially not so much. But Aether Flash, Phyrexian Tyranny, Power Stone Minefield, Light Minefield, they're all good on their own, even if there's only 1 copy of it. Repercussion as well, even funnier if there's 3, but it does hurt us as well. I might be considering cutting Repercussion. Right? Even if we've got the Power Stone Minefields and the Light Minefields in here. Okay? Again, it's only really good with those cards out. Okay? So, Logan, we had Demonic Pact in. We just cut Demonic Pact in here just because if we give it to everybody else, they have 4 turns of really good upsides or 3 turns of really good upsides on it before it actually loses them the game. And I mean, like, drawing our opponent multiple cards, dealing 4 damage, gaining 4 life, you know, all of that stuff is all stuff that can be pointed at us. But we want Donate, and we want Harmless Offering in the deck as ways to give away some of these cards. So these are Harmless Offering, give somebody a card, Donate, give somebody a card. Great. Would we say effects like Oppression backfire too hard? Let's take a look at Oppression. So Oppression is whenever a player plays a spell, that player discards a card from his or her hand. This essentially is everybody has 0 cards in hand. This is essentially nobody has any cards in hand. You cast a spell, you're empty-handed. As soon as everybody's empty-handed, they're in top deck mode. They cast 1 spell a turn. That's all it is. And I think that the downside on that, or the upside in our case, I think just isn't fantastic. Rule Reversal is a good one too, to just give away stuff and steal stuff from our opponents. Role Reversal, 3 mana, sorcery, exchange control of 2 target permanents that share a type. So we can do something like give somebody a Lich's Tomb and take their mana rock, right? But yeah, redundancy for our Fractured Identity, right? Ways to give people stuff. We want to give them harmless offerings, right? These gifts that maybe they don't want. White elephants, right? So let's see. So now let's get into some of the nuts and bolts in the deck. We've cut things down to cards that we like and cards that are likely going to stay in the deck. So our color identity is greenless. We'll take a look at commanders in a second, and we'll adapt the deck to what our commander is going to be, or potentially partner commanders in this case, because we can do that. All right, so nuts and bolts, let's include mana generation. We'll include our soul rings and our arcane signets, right? The old standbys. We can include our talismans. So we'll include our Talisman of Creativity, our Talisman of Conviction, our Talisman of Dominance, and our Talisman of Indulgence. There are 4 talismans, and we go Progress as well. It's just no green, black, white we want, Hierarchy, no green, no green, no green, no green. Okay, so there's all of our talismans, and we can go Signets as well. And we can edit down these signets too, but let's go Azorius, Boros, Dimir, Izzet, Orzhov, Rakdos. Okay, that's a ton of mana rocks in here. We'll definitely be cutting these down, but we'll see what our curve looks like to decide what kind of rocks we end up wanting in the deck. Okay, we might want something like Chromatic Lantern as well, because we are going to be in a 4-color deck. Right? I don't like including 3 mana rocks very often, but when we're in a 4-color deck, having our mana is important. We'll get into our lands as well, and we'll add multicolor lands out there too. I'm going to take a quick drink break here, but let me know in chat what your favorite staples in these colors are. Right? Especially for what we're trying to do. We're trying to be a little bit defensive. We're trying to put our shields up. Do we go Pillow Fort? Do we include Propaganda and Ghostly Prison? Let me know what you think. $60 cards main deck right now. I think we're in a good spot. We've got room to cut out a couple of our mana rocks. Hey, Desdomen. Desdomen. Come on, give me a break. I pronounce it with my Canadian accent. So we got 60 cards in deck, 3 lands, which means we're almost at the point where we want to start adding in lands, but we're going to cut out a couple of these rocks based on what our color balance looks like and where our curve lies. So let's see. We could justify... some of our Pillow Fort effects. I think so as well. But also, I want to say that we're a little light on card draw and creatures right now. So let's add it, and then we'll start making cuts. So Ghostly Prison, Propaganda, and Sphere of Safety. Sphere of Safety. There we go. So let's add in our Pillow Fort effects, because we are going to have to build up to quite a few, to quite a bit of mana in order to pull off what we want to pull off. Right? We're going to be slower. We're going to be dirtlier. So long-term benefit on card draw and mana is going to be important to us. Let's search the premises. Search the premises. Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control. Not bad, right? Create a clue. 4 mana is a bit hefty, but we'll take a look at where our curve lies. Good old Mull Drifter is always decent, but let's see if we've got anything that can give us ongoing card advantage, especially something that can get the ball rolling pretty quickly. Okay, Celestial Dawn. Celeste. Let's actually spell it right. Celestial Dawn. Celestial Dawn. Ooh, weirder, older card. Lands you control are plains. Non-land permanents you control are white. Same is true for spells. You may spend white mana. So it's a color fixer. All right, not bad. Not bad. 3 mana, everything is white. Lands you control are plains. It's okay. Right? I think it's a decent color fixer. Maybe not exactly what we want. Not worth a spot in the deck. Especially if it doesn't make mana on its own. Okay, Out of Time is a recommendation. Right, this is the board wipe, the Vanishing board wipe. I like this one. I like 3 mana board wipes, even if it's temporary. Okay, I think that's a great recommendation. We do want removal in the deck. We don't have a lot of removal, and if we don't want removal, then we absolutely want those Pillow Fort cards. Otherwise, we're just going to get beat up. Maybe by our own cards. Teferi's Protection, another standby. Right, another staple. But it could also be one that could potentially save us. Keep that in mind as well, because if we have something happen that potentially removes one of these you lose the game things, we can Teferi's Protection and nope out of the game. Because then our life total doesn't change, our permanents are still aren't in play. We can't get got that way. So Teferi's Protection, always good. Let's see. Zalzilla, thank you for the first time chat. Classic Board Wipe in Toxic Deluge. Getting a reprint, by the way, in Commander Collection Black. Look at that sweet new art. Let me take a moment to shill. I am giving away a copy of Commander Collection Black. Go check out my Twitter, @CMDRMechanic. Let's see if chat wants to actually... Yeah, there we go. @CMDRMechanic. And check out my details on YouTube as well. So you can enter. We're going to be doing the draw live on Friday. So go on, grab it. All right. Cool. Go enter. Super easy. Follow 2 accounts and retweet. Easy enough. So let's see. So we've got some board wipes. We've got some of our counter spells, our counter magic. We want to, because of the density or lack of density of some of our creatures, I think that we'll definitely be wanting to look at our partners as commanders in this. Something that's a little smaller and a little lower to the ground so that we can cast them and sit on them for a little bit, use them to soak up some damage or to get some resources out of before we get into actually the meat and potatoes of what the deck wants to do. We'll take a look at that in a second. So far, so good. Let's take a look at our curve so far. Our curve right now is 3.05. Love it. That's where you want to see a curve. We're heavy on 2, 3, and 4, but that's a lot of our mana rocks at 2, and we'll be cutting those out. So we're heavier. We're going to be ending up a little bit higher on the curve, probably around 3.5 once we make some of our cuts in here. And some great recommendations. Timna Ludwig, Timna Krom, fantastic. I like all of those. Our color balance here. We've got a green mana symbol in here. Where's our green mana symbol? Let's go hunting for a green mana symbol. Did I put in a green mana rock in here? Let's see. Is it Dominance, Chromatic, Arcane Signet? Do we have a green mana symbol in here? I don't know. We'll take a look. I do want to remind everybody that if you want to take a look at the... Oh, right, in the commander. Thank you, everybody. The big brain fart moment. If you want to take a look at the deck list as we're updating it as well, head on over to my Moxfield profile, too. All of that stuff is in there, right? And once again, all of my really cool sponsors you can check out, too. Right? Whether that be Harry Tarantula for your singles, Alter Sleeves for some cool bling, Moxfield, the best deck builder online, and Quiver for all of the best card-carrying accessories and sleeves. I know Logan, Seraph6, you are a big fan as well. Love that picture of you with your arsenal of Quiver stuff. Absolutely loved it. You got the orange one too, which is sick. Absolutely love it. I immediately talk to them because they do sponsor me, and I'm like, yo, fam, what up? Orange kind of my gig. Okay, so let's see. We've got let's take a look at our color balance again. So we're gonna end up probably around 3.5 on our curve once we cut out some of our rocks and we see where this is at. But we're looking at blue and white being the majority of our color balance, and then black and red being right about even. So blue more often than not. So we're gonna add in our shocks. We're going to add in our pain lands. We're going to add in a couple of lands that make any color of mana, like Command Tower and Forbidden Orchard. And typically that's where I like to rock my mana curves. And then we'll fill out the rest with our basic lands. Right, so let's go Command Tower. Let's go for Exotic Orchard, not Forbidden Orchard. Exotic Orchard. All right, let's go City of Brass because we are in 5 color. Mana Confluence. All right, and then we'll potentially add in Path of Ancestors. Path of the Ancestors. Path of the Ancestors. Path of Ancestors. Right now, my favorite playmat, too. I got the cool Vegas art playmat. The promo art. Real good. Real good. So Path of Ancestors. Then we want our Shocks and our Pain lands. Help me rattle them off in chat, team, so that I can get through this Hallowed Fountain. Okay, so that's blue-white. We've got Steam Vents, blue-red. We've got Blood Crypt, red-black. We've got Godless Shrine, black-white. Let's see. So we got, I typically like to go either the allied colors or the enemy colors first so I can get through all of them. Sacred Foundry. Perfect. And we should end up with 6 of them, right? Watery Grave. So we've got black, white, black, blue, black, red. Right? So there's our 3 black ones. We've got white, black, white, blue, white, red. There are 3 white ones. We've got red, white, red, blue, red, black. There are 3 red ones. And we've got Watery Grave, Hallowed Fountain, and Steam Vents are 3 blue ones. Okay, fantastic. So we're good. So we've got our 3 fetches, for our shocks for each color. We want to go Pain lands for the same. So Yavimaya, oh no, Yavimaya is the green one. So we'll go Caves of Koilos, Battlefield Forge. Caves of Koilos, Battlefield Forge, Adarkar Waste, thank you. The allied Pain lands need a reprint. They are getting expensive, right? I mean, Adarkar Waste being $13 for Pain land, too much. We get Sulf. Sulphurous Springs? Let's see. Come on, I can never spell Sulphurous Springs. I always spell it with an H. So Sulphurous Springs. We need the cool ass Foglio art on this one with the Hot Tub Devil. Yeah, right. Love it. Hot Tub Devil, always the best. All right. What are our other Pain lands? Our other Pain lands are. We need one more ally Pain land, right? Let's see. So we've got Caves of Koilos, Battlefield Forge, the blue-black. Yeah, that is Underground River. Thank you very much. The blue-black Pain land. I knew we were missing one. Underground River. All right. Again, like these being like $14-15 for a Pain land, these should be reprinted in every commander set. Like they've started to get to it with like Underground River, but it's still $14. I'd like to see these sub $5. Mana bases should not be the most expensive part of your decks. I just want to make sure everybody is aware. All right. Let's see. So we've got 19 here. We've got our Pains and our Shocks. So Ancient Tomb's a little too much. I don't like putting Ancient Tomb in any deck that I wouldn't normally put our like Mana Crypts and stuff in. It's too fast of fast mana. The Triomes, I like though. So Triome, and it's Saval and Rogrin. I can never remember the names of these. Rogrin, Island Mountain Plains, Saval Mountain Plains Swamp. Fantastic. Looking forward to the rest of those triomes being printed in Streets of New Capenna. Bank on it. They've already said that it's going to be a wedge block, so or a wedge set. So expect the triomes to come in. They probably aren't going to be probably aren't going to be called triomes in this. They're probably going to be called like districts or something. Somebody clip that, because when they're called districts, I want credit for it. Yeah, hoping for a better naming convention. Absolutely. You're probably not going to get a better naming convention. They're probably going to be called like set-specific family name district or something like that. And we don't necessarily want 3 of each basic, just because our color balance is a little bit lopsided towards blue and white. We're probably going to go 4-4-2-2 in this, in my opinion. All right. And now we have... Yeah, 2% of mana symbols, 1 mana symbol. Oh, it's still the commander. Always freaks me out. All right, so let's go island, plains, swamp, and mountain. All right, and like I said, we're going to go 2 swamp. So we're going to go and... add 1. We're going to go 2 mountain. Add 1. Then we're going to add 3 of each of the plains and islands. Okay, that brings us up to 33 land. Ideally, we're looking at a curve of still 3, but we want to cut a couple of our rocks out of that. Probably like the Rakdos rocks in this case. Because they are our lowest color combination. But we definitely want a couple of more lands in here. I want to be up at 36 lands, if not more. So let's cut Talisman of Indulgence. And let's cut Rakdos Signet. I also want some more room for some card draw as well. 3 more lands. Right now, let's add in some more basics. So we will go up to 3 on each of our lower ones because we just cut out their rocks. We'll go up to 5 on our higher one here. Okay, so there's 36 lands. That gives us 2 spots in the deck for other things. Okay, I want to focus on card draw, and then we'll take a look at what our commander can be. Okay, I think we're good on non-basic lands. Here's a point of advice, and I'm going to end up clipping this, and I'm going to do a short on it as well. Play more basic lands, okay? You can throw out all of those great non-basics. Nothing is better than a basic land. Comes into play untapped, creates you a mana the turn you want it. Fantastic. Better than risking a land coming into play tapped and not doing anything for you the turn that it comes into play. It's always better than the benefit of doing something 5 or 6 turns down the road. Play more basic lands. All right, so let's see. 2 more. I want to avoid adding in Rhystic Study or Smothering Tithe or Mystic Remora. I really want to avoid adding those in, even though they are the most consistent card draw engines out there. Does anybody else have any recommendations for really good card draw engines? Muffin's Whirlwind of Thought I like a lot. So Whirlwind of Thought is a Jeskai enchantment, 4 mana. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, draw a card. This isn't going to be a deck where we're casting multiple spells a turn until we're ready to go off, though. This is going to be like a cast a spell, wait around, cast a spell, wait around. I like this more if we were a Spellslinger deck and we needed to refuel our hands. I want something that's going to get us more passive benefit. If we take a turn off and do nothing, for instance, or we play 1 spell, I want something that's going to be a little bit better. The AMC, I think Necropotence is a little bit higher power than we want in this, and that triple black is going to be difficult for us to cast in this deck. We have a couple of triple white spells in this deck, or we've got a triple white spell in this deck and a couple of double black spells, I think triple black is going to be a little bit hard to pull off. And again, it's really powerful. Phyrexian Arena, Outpost Siege, Nezahal. Nezahal's a little too much. Honestly, I might throw in a card that I've been really high on lately, and that's Keen Duelist. Keen Duelist, especially with a deck that's got a mana curve like we do, that's going to have like a 3.5, comes down nice and early, starts drawing us cards, domes opponents, deals us a bit of damage, but it's something that everybody can really appreciate, and it gets the table involved. Speaking of getting the table involved, we might put in something that, puts the Monarchy in play too, just for fun, in order to get people starting to look at each other. This is about giving gifts, even if those gifts, those roses have their thorns, if it were. All right. What's the best court? Let's go Court of, and let's go potentially Court of Grace, because Court of Grace can come down and start making us blockers as well, even if they're just 1/1s. And if we manage to keep the Monarchy, maybe with our Pillow Fort effects, we start making angels. I kind of like that. Even though Court of Ire is great in that it's, again, one of those clocks that we can talk about. Okay, all of them pretty decent. Court of Ambition, Discard Outlet, Court of Cunning, Mill. I don't think Mill's quite the strategy that we're going for here. I agree that Court of Ire is very strong, stronger than it looks. However, it is the highest mana cost of them. I'd rather go with Court of Grace and start making tokens more than anything. Give us some chump blockers. We are really light on creatures in here. Yeah, and I think the even though the courts make people uneasy, I think that the Court of Grace is like the most harmless of the courts. Getting the Monarchy in play is great because it's going to pass it around to everybody else and make you not a target because they're going to want to get the Monarchy from each other. Okay? We are sort of Damocles, the AMC. Don't test me on my Greek knowledge. I got that. So Court of Grace is in here, but we're at 100 cards right now. So let's take a look at what our deck list looks like. We're at 3.08 on the mana curve. We have just as many 2, 3, and 4 mana value spells in the deck. I think that's pretty decent. I don't know if we have enough card draw in the deck is the only thing. Let's take a look at some opening hands and see where we lie. Oh, but before we do that, we've got to pick our commanders. I almost forgot. We've got to pick our commanders, fam. So let's take a look at our partner commanders. So we want anything that has partner in it. Partner, and we'll go anything but green. Exclude these colors. Has partner. And we'll grab this, and we'll throw it over here so that we can look at it without bleaching everybody's eyes. So we want to go with 4 color, meaning we want only our 2 color commanders that we want to take a look at. We've got Akiri Lineslinger. Good one, comes down early, but we don't run a lot of artifacts apart from Mana Rocks in this deck. Bruce Tarl would be great if we got a little bit more punchy in this deck. Ishai, Ojutai Dragon Speaker, I actually really like as a potential in this deck because it's one that becomes a problem. It's one that over time everybody else is going to do things and make you a big punchy flyer, right? Not bad, but I do like the ones that have card draw stapled on them, right? Timna Krom and Timna Ludwig are 2 of the ones that have been recommended. Let's take a look at Krom first. Krom is a 5 mana flying haste. Whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, draw a card. Big punchy, not bad, and draws this card. Really good. Okay? Not bad at all. Right? pretty decent value. Ludwig, on the other hand, same color identity, says at the beginning of each player's end step, that player may draw a card if a player other than you lost life this turn. Again, incentivizing attacking other players. Also comes down right on our average mana curve here. I think Ludwig, combined with either a Ravos, Soul Tender, which is other creatures you control get +1/+1. You may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. We don't run a lot of creatures, so that Tymna is looking like a good choice. Tymna the Weaver, lifelink at the beginning of your post-combat main phase. You may pay X life, where X is the number of opponents that were dealt combat damage this turn. If you do, draw X life. So it's great if you're spreading out some attacks, if you're attacking 1 or 2 people at once. You can draw some extra cards. Not bad. The other option, like I mentioned, is Ishai, who gets bigger and better over time, and Vial Smasher. Vial Smasher says when you cast your first spell each turn, choose an opponent at random, punch them for that spell's mana value. Right? Not bad. Not bad at all. 3 and 4 mana, pretty good. But I think the card draw engine, which is what we were weak on, means Tymna and Ludwig are some of our best options here. Okay, so let's go back into our deck details. Let's see. How do I go back in and change this? Oh, come on. Don't panic on stream, Chris. Change commander. Thank you. Wondering where that was. So we'll go Ludwig. Ludwig. And Tymna. Great recommendations. Again, card draw on bodies. Gets us our 4-color identity. Turn 3, we start casting some of them. Right? Even if they're encouraging other people to punch each other. Perfectly fine. Love it. Love it. So we're up to 101 now because we did add in a partner commander. Now we can remove potentially another mana rock from in here. We are looking at, again, the same curve. So let's see. What do we want to remove? Do we want to cut from the top, something high end? Do we want to cut something from our mana rock selection? Right now we've got, I think all but 2 of these artifacts are mana rocks. So we're running 13 mana rocks. Absolutely not necessary. Chris, what are you doing? And let's cut one of the signets. Let's cut a good old Orzhov signet here. Bam. That gives us 100 cards. Very nice. Now is when I like to run us through a couple of hands on the deck to see if we get keepables. Okay? Sorry, scrolling too far. So let's see. Let's deal a fresh hand. No lands in our first hand. Not a great sign, fam. Not a great sign. Second hand, we've got tons of lands, Ghostly Prison, Demonic Tutor, right? We could cast that Tymna on 3, or we can cast that Ghostly Prison on 3. Say, Nico, we are building a deck around Fractured Identity right now. We want a bunch of cards that we want to give to other people, either to make them lose the game, to make life harder. Consider it like a Zedru deck or a Blim Comedic Genius deck, but Fractured Identity is our hidden commander in it. Basically, we want to set up some walls, some pillow forts, and then, bam, give people gifts that they don't want. All right? Whether that be a Phage the Untouchable, or whether that be a Leveler and exile their libraries. Let's do some fun. So, random question, how did you get your idea of a secondary and tertiary commander? Never heard of that before. Me. So, do you mean, like, secondary and tertiary commanders within the deck? If you're brewing from within the deck, if you've got your primary thing that you want to do within the deck, you want redundancy. Okay? Redundancy is important because if you can't stick a commander, or you can't find that Fractured Identity, or it gets milled or exiled right away, say somebody plays a Gonti Lord of Luxury and steals your Fractured Identity right away, you don't want your deck to not do anything. So the Harmless Offerings and the donates and the Zedrus and the blims are going to get you doing the same kind of thing that you want, giving people things that they might not necessarily want. And that redundancy is important. Okay? Because you can't rely on your commanders. They are the most consistent thing in your deck, your commanders. So you want a saturation of cards inside your deck that help you out. When I'm working with Academy Manufactor, I want to make sure I've got ways to get Academy Manufactor, but I want a bunch of things that just make treasures and clues and food on their own, and things that key off of that. Academy Manufactor makes things go insane, but your deck works without it anyway, and that's important. That's where your secondary and your tertiary key pieces come in. I just call them your secondary and tertiary commanders because in this deck, they're literally legendary creatures. Right? They are like a commander within the 99. You play them and your deck continues to do the thing. Okay. Replace one island with Mystic Sanctuary. And another instant... it's another instant regrow. Love it. However, Mystic Sanctuary needs you to have islands in order to get that effect. You need 3 or more other islands in order to get that effect. Apart from the Shocklands and those couple of basics that we have, we can't guarantee that we're going to have that many islands in play. Yeah, I know they count. We'll do it, but if we're running a couple of hands and we find that we are short on islands, then we'll see. But it is a slot that gets us back our Fractured Identity. Okay. I guess, once you said that, said you want your main commander, and then you sometimes have another card that can act as a sub-commander. Yeah, so that's what I mean about having redundancy. So if your commander is what your deck is all about, your commander can sometimes not be of convenience to you. If your commander gets removed once or twice, the mana cost on it goes through the roof, and you just aren't going to be casting it anymore. Make sure that your deck still does the thing, even if you can't cast your commander. So you want cards within your deck that are redundant or just have high value floors. If you can't cast your commander or don't have access to your commander, maybe somebody has stolen it from you, don't just sit there and say, well, I can't do the thing anymore. Okay? Path of Ancestry taps for any color mana, is what it does, Ninja Bao. Right? It taps for any color mana within our commander's color identity. So in this case, it's an enter the battlefield tapped, taps for 4 colors of mana, and incidentally scries us if we cast either of our commanders, right? Or any of the other humans in the deck. Not bad. Okay, so let's continue running it through a couple of hands here. We are about to wrap up. We are reaching hour 2 here, but let's see how many keepable hands we have. Our first hand is 2 mana and a rock. Okay, perfectly keepable. We've got, some higher end stuff. We've got a target for Fractured Identity. If we go grab it, we've got some protection. Let's see what a next draw looks like. More land. Narset's Reversal. Okay. Functional. Gets us to one of our commanders, at least. Lets us start drawing some cards. Next up, bunch of land, couple of rocks, Toxic Deluge. Love it. This means on turn 3, we're casting one of our commanders. We can protect them, and if we need to wipe the board, we can. Ideally, we want to dirtle until we get to what we want to do. There's a target for Fractured Identity a couple of cards in. Then we just need to go find it. Donate and Harmless Offering with a couple of targets in here, but only 1 land. Gotta ship it. So here's an example. Here's Mystic Sanctuary. Mystic Sanctuary with 1 island. If we need to play Mystic Sanctuary as our 3rd land, it's just a comes into play tapped island. That's not great. I'm hoping that it's not going to be a miss more often than not, but it feels real bad if, we could just be playing a regular island that enters untapped, but who knows. Mystical Tutor means that, we could be putting our Fractured Identity on top of our library right away. Not bad. We've got the mana here to potentially be casting one of our commanders on turn 3. No ramp, which you don't love to see, but still good. Here's, a turn 1 Path of Ancestry. Turn 2, we do a Talisman. Right? We can't exactly cast anything else. We could Vampiric Tutor and go grab Fractured Identity, but we don't have anything to cast it on. All right. Next hand, couple of land, a couple of signets. Havoc Festival, Leveler. Fine, perfectly fine. Okay, 2 land and a rock, keepable. Right? We can't exactly cast anything. We could cast our Timna on 3 and start drawing more cards. Not bad. I think the deck does what we want it to do. There's our Fractured Identity in hand. We could turn 1, go grab. Well, so here's ideal. Okay, this is a Lich's Tomb and a Fractured Identity in hand. Turn 1, we play a Plains and we Enlighten Tutor for Soul Ring. Put Soul Ring on top of our library. Next turn, we draw and cast that Soul Ring. Then we cast our Lich's Tomb. Hope nobody deals any damage to us. And we Fractured Identity that Lich's Tomb, and we laugh all the way to the bank. Right? I mean, that's provided nobody deals any damage to us. It's a big maybe, but it's got our 2 pieces in hand. All right, so let's see. Do we have one more keepable? No land in this one. Ship it. Here we go. 3 land. No swamps for this Demonic Tutor, though. I would ship this. We've got no rock and no way to cast a Demonic Tutor. Ship it. Here we go. 4 land. Boros Signet. We've got a Role Reversal that we could cast. We've got Aether Flash that we could cast. Love it. Love it. All right. So the deck's sitting at a hefty $900 price tag right now because of those tutors, because of those shocks. Let's update to cheapest just to see where this goes. So we start at 901. We update to cheapest. We drop $40 from that price tag. Not bad. Not bad. All right. Still, it's a little bit of an expensive deck. I think it's an interesting experiment. But for a Fractured Identity deck, it does what we want it to. All right. So for everybody watching this VOD up on YouTube, let me know in the comments below what you would change in this deck, what you would add to it, what your recommendations are, and if you think that it's a cool concept. Have you ever built from a card within the 99 before and built everything else around it? What are your favorite hidden commanders? I think you know some of mine. As always, folks, thanks for watching. Good luck and have fun. A massive shout out to all of the patrons that support the channel. I could not do this without you. In particular, a special shout out to our Lodestone Golems, Andrew M., Ben Davis, Ben Frayne, Jonathan McManus, and Cameron Scott. And our premium patrons are Metalwork Colossi, Judson Bates, Matt Oakes, Matthew Chandler, Sean Carrier, Timothy Conan, and Wyatt M. Thank you, everyone.